Well, one of the themes of this conflict that we keep returning to is the battle to control the narrative. Both sides have made repeated accusations against each other, some of which we've looked at and dismissed, and some of which appear to be credible. Over the past few days and weeks, we've seen Russian official sources and state media referencing actions by the Azov battalion. So let's talk to CGTN's Duncan Hooper. Duncan, tell us a little bit more about what this is.
This is a really controversial subject, Julia, and some people would probably claim that we were actually doing the work of the Russian propaganda machine just by bringing it up, because the Azov battalion is something that Russian officials regularly mention as a kind of bogeyman to justify their assertion that Ukraine is run by Nazis. But I think it's worth us talking about it just to understand what we can and what we cannot judge from the presence of this group. So it was formed in 2014 when the Ukrainian army was really buckling under the pressure of an insurgency in the southeast of the country, separatists with support from Russia breaking away. And it was made up of volunteers, a lot of them from football clubs. And they came together and they fought, and they were widely praised for what they did, especially inside Ukraine. And after the sort of initial phase of the conflict, they were adopted into the Ukrainian military, and they became part of the National Guard. And Russian official accounts very rarely name-check any other units of the Ukrainian military, but this one does get mentioned a lot by official accounts and by supporters of the Russian argument as well. And it's certainly true that many recruits in this battalion are, or certainly can be described as, neo-Nazis. And spokespeople for the battalion in the past have admitted this, and they say this isn't the official position, this is people's own personal viewpoints. And when you look at the social media of some people who belong to the battalion, you can tell that their viewpoints would be considered to be deeply, deeply offensive to many people. So there certainly is an issue there, but if you look at the numbers, they're very small. Before the conflict, the Azov battalion numbered around 2,000 people, and that's out of a military which is somewhat larger than 200,000 back then. Both have grown, but probably with the new civilians that have come into the Ukrainian army, that ratio is even wider now, and the Azov battalion is a really small proportion. And for context, Germany probably has a similar size military, and they said in 2020 they were investigating 600 cases of suspected links to the far right. So it's kind of the same sort of ballpark. And the other fact that we need to look at, when the Azov battalion set up a political party, the National Corps, it contested the election in 2019 with a number of other far-right parties, and they won just over 2%, failing to win a single seat. So it's certainly true that they have a troubled history. They have been accused of war crimes in the past, but I think that it is not proof that Ukraine is infiltrated or run by Nazis.
The big development in the information war today has been the blocking of Instagram in Russia. What is the significance of that?
Yeah, there are two really big players from the Western media inside Russia. One is YouTube, still available, by far the biggest, and then it was Instagram with around 80 million users. And I think the Russians last week, they looked at Facebook, Meta, the company that owns both Facebook and Instagram, which changed its designation, which previously had said, we will block anyone who incites violence. They then came out and said, well, unless it's someone in Ukraine calling for the death of Russian soldiers, and we think that that's okay, we're going to allow them to do that. So Russia came out and said, I think, we don't have a choice here. This is an extremist organisation. We're going to have to block it. We looked a bit at Instagram last week. We saw that it does contain pro-Russian sentiments, some anti-war sentiments, but also a lot of other material. And this certainly does have a problem with misinformation. We saw a good example of a post that was shared by Joe Rogan. You remember Joe Rogan? He's the reason that you can't get Neil Young's music on Spotify, because Neil Young said he wouldn't share a platform with someone who shared unscientific information. He shared this post which seemed to show the actor Steven Seagal joining up with Russian special forces. Now, if you or I look at that post, we look at the background, you see the trees, you can instantly say, this is not the winter in Ukraine. This is not right now. But he shared it, he had to apologise, and I think that's just a good example of how messy this all is. But certainly, it is going to change the situation in Russia.
And we will return to it in coming days. For the moment, Duncan, thank you very much indeed. Duncan Hooper.